Welcome to The Real with Jamantha. I'm Jamantha Williams-Watson. Today we have an amazing person here with us today. She's an author. She is a social activist. She's a loving mother, a kind wife, and just an all-around beautiful person. We have none other than Kimba Smith. And this is her book, Poster Child, The Kimba Smith Story. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to The Real.
Thank you so much for having me on The Real. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I would think of no one else but you to come on and share your story of challenging, triumph, and how you actually made it over a very rough time and a rough period in your life. And I'd like for you to talk about as much as you'd like to. I remember the day, I remember 2 days, and I'll say, I remember one day I was with my students, and one of the mothers was talking to us, and she said she just read an article in Emerge magazine. And she talked so much about this young woman, and she said, my life has changed since I read this article. And I couldn't do anything but, leave the meeting and then go and read the article about Kimba Smith, and your story. I think it was amazing. That was the first time I had ever heard about you, and I read about, the devastating tragedy that has turned into triumph.
Yes.
The triumphant part was we were all at Disney World, my family and my sister's family. We were at Disney World. And we went to Disney World on a Christmas day. We were there during the Christmas day. And on our way back home, we had to stop, I think it was in South Carolina, North Carolina, in one of the hotels. And no one else, I don't think anyone else in the family even paid much attention to it except my sister and I. And we shared adjoining hotel rooms. Mm-hmm. When we got the news that President Clinton had pardoned Kimba Smith, oh my God. That was just so amazing. That was just so amazing.
God is good.
God is good.
God is
We were just going for it, and the children were looking at us, and and the husbands were looking like, what in the world is going on? But that was such a beautiful day. I want you to take us back, if you don't mind, because there's so many people who need to hear your story, who have no idea what it is we're talking about and why we're holding this book. But so many people need to hear your story. You're such a beautiful person, inside and out, and you shared your story with us, and you didn't have to do that. Not in the book, not in on talk shows, not anywhere, but you have decided to come out and share who you are and what you've been through with us, with the rest of the world. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Well, really I'm being obedient to God. Mm-hmm. I've shared on numerous accounts, be careful what you pray for. Mm-hmm. Because when I turned myself in 7 months pregnant, in a jail cell, scared to death, not knowing what was going to be my ultimate outcome, I got on my knees and cried and prayed out to God and asked God to allow me to be a voice to prevent other young people from going down the same path that I was on, and I didn't know what my outcome was going to be. So basically to have those prison doors open and have a modern miracle of the President of the United States signing a document to release me from federal prison, I knew that coming out that I had to share the story. And so the story in itself basically started while I was a student at Hampton University, and was excited about my newfound independence, newfound freedom, excited about going to a HBCU. And so the moment I stepped foot on campus, I shared with the young people, on my mind wasn't, well, what's Hampton good at? What am I going to major in? Going to predominantly white schools growing up back in the day, the moment I stepped foot on campus, I was thinking, oh my goodness, look at all these fine black men. And I just was, I looked at what was going on at the time, and during that period, I dated a drug dealer, and I'm not one of those people that have the prison experience to say I didn't know what it was that he was doing. I had heard what it was that he did, but I thought like some of the other college girls, what it was that he did was his business, and I'm doing school. I would see him come on campus, pick up girls that were in sororities on the dean's list. And I was going through a period of figuring out Kimba, knowing who Kimba was. And in that process, I developed low self-esteem, low self-confidence. I mean, obviously today I know I'm a 10, but back then I had some self-esteem issues, which I think a lot of our young girls, young women have. And I ended up getting into this relationship with Peter. It was a 3.5-year relationship. Initially, he was Mr. Knight in Shining Armor. And then the relationship kind of went south where there were some red flags, and the relationship turned abusive, and then there was a point where the federal government had been investigating him and his drug business. Eventually, he killed his best friend because he thought his best friend had cooperated with the authorities. And at that particular time, I couldn't believe that I was actually with someone who had taken another person's life. And so for me, this relationship, making unhealthy choices, being actually, one point thinking I love this person, and the next point that love turned more so to fear.
Right.
And I felt as if not only did I have to protect myself and protect my parents, that I felt like I had to do whatever it was that he wanted me to do. And so I ended up, going further into the snowball roller coaster, and eventually I turned myself in 7 months pregnant, and the federal government told me that they didn't want me, that they wanted him. I was still fearful to cooperate, and eventually Peter was found murdered in the same apartment that we had been living in. And at that point, that's when tables turned, and the federal government held me accountable for 255 keys of crack cocaine, even though the prosecutor said I never handled, used, or sold any of the drugs that were involved. And I ended up giving birth to my son while I was incarcerated. And after I gave birth to my son, I ended up going for a sentencing hearing. And at the sentencing hearing, there was expert testimony with regard to the domestic violence and abuse. But yet and still, my 96-year-old judge still decided that he was going to, not 96, I'm sorry, I believe he was about 89 years old. And he made the decision that he was going to ignore the expert testimony. He wanted to use me as a deterrent to others, and he still sentenced me to 294 months in federal prison.
Which is how much? It's 220.
Exactly. When the sentence came down, I couldn't even calculate how much that was, but ultimately it was 24 and a half years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. And at that point, I gave birth to my son. I knew that I was going to eventually be transferred to a federal prison, but I had no physical contact with my son after I gave birth to him and went into federal prison. So in my mind, I was trying to calculate the fact that even though I was 23 years old at the time, I was sentenced to 24 and a half years, which was actually longer than I had actually been living on this earth, and that I wasn't going to be able to come home until my son was a grown man. But you've heard me speak in my testimony. I leaned on my faith in God. That's all I had at that moment. I felt like I didn't have any control of my life, and I also was the type of person at that particular point where I realized that I messed up, and I wanted my life to go on the right track, because I had people that asked me in the past, well, Kimba, why would you even turn yourself in 7 months pregnant? Why didn't you just kind of stay out on the run? But for me, that wasn't an option, and I wanted to get my life back. I knew I had, my unborn son, and I thought that everything would work out. But ultimately, it was an uphill battle after I turned myself in, and thank God that I had two parents that, my parents, everybody knows that my parents are my heroes, because some family members don't know how to deal with having a loved one incarcerated and the embarrassment and shame that sometimes goes along with that. But I'm grateful that my parents advocated for my release and spoke out about my situation. And so that caused people to be engaged about my story, and it caused Emerge magazine. George Curry was the publisher at the time. Reginald Stewart wrote the article, and I thank God for the gift of the pen and writing, because he wrote a story that moved Black America.
It did.
And so because of that story, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund decided that they were going to take on my case pro bono. For free. Only God. And Elaine Jones, she was the director of the organization at the time, and she basically was from Virginia, and she came and visited me in the federal prison and said that she was going to do whatever she needed to do to bring her baby girl home. Not her baby girl home, her home girl home. And so she rallied to help gain my release, and basically she approached the National Council of Negro Women. She approached the Links Incorporated, and she also approached Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and they ended up making my case in this issue of first-time nonviolent drug offenders. And at the time, the fastest growing population within prison were Black women. And so these organizations rallied, wrote letters, gave money, signed petitions to help towards my release. But it wasn't about people feeling sorry for my parents, or it wasn't just about people feeling sorry for me. NAACP Legal Defense Fund had hoped that my case would set a precedent for other women and first-time nonviolent drug offenders. But the courts wouldn't allow me back in. They didn't want to hear my case. And so my only source of relief was to receive executive clemency from the president. And so December 22nd, 2000 was that great day after serving 6.5 years where I was eventually released from federal prison.
And it made the headlines, days after we found out about it. It was a good Christmas gift for you, for your parents.
It was the ultimate.
Yes.
And so I am so very grateful to God, and obviously when I first came out to have the President of the United States, it just was like surreal for President Clinton to have done that. And so I was so grateful, for it. But I will say, as it relates to today, let's bring it today. And, Kim Kardashian advocated for Alice Johnson, and Alice Johnson is the only person that President Trump has commuted their sentence since. It's only one person, but there are so many others. And hence the reason why after I was released from federal prison, it was important for me to advocate for those that I left behind. And so when I point back to Alice Johnson, I know she's grateful for what Trump did for her in giving, she had a life sentence and had been in prison for over 20-something years. For me, I had been in prison for 6.5 years and still had a significant amount of time left. But at the same time, President Clinton, the person that gave me a second chance, was responsible for signing a crime bill that caused the big prison boom. So, I'm grateful, but I do think the Clintons have recognized, the error in that legislation. So,
that's right. Yeah, wow. Your story is one in which you don't even know where to start. It's an elephant. It's the huge elephant in and outside of the room, and I guess I'll start at the head, where the parents are. And I heard so many things when you hear about Kimba Smith in the beginning. The only thing you hear about, I hear that you reared in a wonderful family, middle class, and I think you even mentioned it in the book.
Yes.
How could somebody be so stupid? That's
right.
everyone, And so she knew from the beginning, and you even say that you did know. And so, you know, you can't be so innocent, but I know there's so many times that men, women, boys, girls, you know, even animals, you know, we all make mistakes.
Right.
You know, and no one really gets to choose. I don't think you would have chosen this path to be able to come and talk to me if you wanted to come on a talk show. I don't think you would have chosen it this way, you know. You know, we don't get to choose all the time the mistakes that we make. We do, but, you know, we don't know that they're going to mushroom into all these, you know, traumatic incidents and, you know, these people that we had no idea.
Right.
What do you say to people who are devastated right now? Girls, boys, people who are incarcerated, who may be listening to this and they're, you know, my story is just horrible. I've made the biggest mistake. I've embarrassed my family. I've done all these wonderful things. I mean, horrible things. What can I do, you know?
Well, one of the things that I'm very grateful for, and one of my biggest fears in writing that book and doing the Emerge article was the Black community is going to just tear this up and be so judgmental and critical of the choices. And for me, it wasn't just them being critical of me. My biggest fear was them being critical with my parents.
Right.
And I didn't want them to have to suffer any negativity from that. But for me, in sharing it, it was more important about helping other people. And so, you know, I'm grateful that so many media outlets were interested in sharing the story. But what I will say, number one, to the people that want to be judgmental and say, you know, you made these horrible choices, you were stupid, you shouldn't have done X, Y, Z, is that where we are in the state of our country and Black Americans, African Americans, that it's important, it's our responsibility to hold legislators accountable for how your tax money is being spent. And for me to have been a first-time nonviolent drug offender and to not be a threat to public safety, that you don't want to just be throwing your money away to keep Black and brown people incarcerated because you think, you know, they screwed up and this, that. Yes, people should be punished. And I'm not trying to advocate that there shouldn't be any punishment. But we have a system of mass incarceration that is doing our communities a disservice. It's in particular, not only when you think of adults that, you know, some states may spend over $30,000 a year to keep a person incarcerated, but you have juveniles now that whole system is skyrocketing, where it costs over $100,000 a year to keep them incarcerated. So I would just challenge that person that would want to be judgmental and analyzing, are we really being smart about what justice looks like in our country? Now, going to the young person that may be making the poor choices, my suggestion to them is to turn a new leaf and not focus on just the negative and wanting to continue digging themselves deeper in the hole. Understand that you could help someone else by not being ashamed of your hurt, your pain, and turn that hurt and pain around to something positive where you can help lift somebody else up out of their situation. Not let that embarrassment and shame just smother you to the point where you're hopeless.
I think when I was reading the book, I think, you know, I love your courage, but I see two people who, you know, just had this one little beautiful girl, and they're living in the suburbs. And the suburbs of America, they have a wonderful home, and they come to work, go to church, you know, drink milk, you know, just have this wonderful cookie cutter life. But these people in this book, these are some fierce soldiers. You know, these two people, I mean, when they find out that their only child is going through all of this, and so many people in the world, not just in America, but so many people in the world will say, you know what, you've made this choice, get out. And don't ever come back in here, and don't bring that trash in here, and all those kind of things that people would tell their kids. That's number one. And then they accepted your son. They brought your son in, after, you've had your son in prison and your mom is taking care. I remember seeing you guys at Regency Mall, and I know you don't remember, because the way I approached you, and you didn't run away or you didn't shy away, and your mother didn't either, was like, okay, this happens to her all the time. But I mean, the two of us saw each other. You had just gotten out, and the two of us saw each other. I saw you, and I just embraced you, and we just held for so long. And your mother was just, she understood. And I think, I said, that's just bravery. That's courageousness. I mean, and that's good parenting.
It's the power of prayer, mm-hmm. also knowing God's word and the prodigal son story, and my parents knowing what they poured in me, mm-hmm. and they did have that unconditional love, and that a lot of parents do not have, and I'm so very grateful that they didn't wash their hands, because they had built the American dream.
They did.
They did not build the American dream so they could squander their retirement to help get their baby girl out of jail. But I thank God for their strength to keep their marriage together, mm-hmm. to keep everything, finances. I mean, even though they did file for bankruptcy like 2 or 3 times, but they still held on to their faith. And I know that faith is what everyone kind of saw and witnessed, and that's something that I am forever grateful for. Mm-hmm. But I will go back to the fact that even though to everyone else, and I did have it all. Yeah. As far as what was provided for me as a child in comparison to what I know some of our young people have today and back then. But if you as a person, individual, do not love you the way that you need to, if you, as everybody else can think you're beautiful and have it going on, but if you don't have that within yourself, if you don't have that connection to your higher power, your God, to know that He's made you with individual gifts and you don't have to look at anybody else and compare yourself to anybody else. But if you live in this sense of insecurity, doubt, not loving yourself, then that's when other opportunities kind of creep in that your parents may not have raised you that way, but these outside influences you're not prepared for because you don't love you the way that you need to in order to Wakanda them away.
Well, I know once I heard you speak and you said, you're here at this university, gorgeous women, and then Peter sees you, you see Peter, you had been seeing him for a while, and then all of a sudden he sees you, and you're like, oh my God, this is me, What was that like? Just him seeing you for the first time, really noticing you. How did that make you feel?
I mean, it was like a light shining down. Oh, you noticed me, and me having these butterfly feelings in my stomach, and what is he gonna say? But like I share with young people and given my story, if I loved me the way that I needed to, I would have known it was only a matter of time before he was going to say hello, and I would have been consciously thinking, am I even going to speak to him? What is he even about? But I was so caught up in him, and I think it's important for our young ladies and grown women to know that it's not about him and the relationship and impressing him. It's about what you want. What are your standards? What are your morals? What will you want? What will and won't you tolerate in a relationship? But being young, 18, 19-year-old Kimba, I didn't make that distinction quite yet.
Right, but you do now, and all of that, and you're able to help so many people to really, read the book. Yes. Hopefully it'll be a movie. Read the book, watch the movie, listen to her story, and countless times, you had to pave this road for someone so that they would not have to. Yes. And I think that is remarkable. I think that's the hand of God. It's nothing is wasted, and you've proven that to us. I just want to ask you one more thing. I know your mom may not have been able to see you. Your dad, you were in California, then you were in Connecticut, you were all over, and you're in the prison, and you were in this nice little cozy place out in the suburbs, before, but now you're in the prison where some people have been there before, you know, and this is their life. Did you ever think that you were going to get out?
The only way that I was to remain sane, and I think this is not only in physical prisons, but in mental prisons, even with people in the free world, was that I could not believe that I was going to just squander away in prison and lose hope.
Okay.
If I would have lost hope in prison, I probably would have lost my mind, come out bitter, angry, because I turned myself in 1994. Mm-hmm. I wasn't supposed to be released from federal prison until January of 2016. Mm-hmm. And I would have been very bitter, but it was very important for me to remain faithful in what I knew God could do. And so one of the things that troubles me is that I do have a sense of survivor's guilt because of the women that I left behind in prison. Right. And so, you know, I have a friend, you know, Michelle West, she's from Michigan. She served over 25 years and have a life sentence. So when I make the statement that, you know, I know God knew my heart back then, and I had to trust and believe that I wouldn't stay in prison for 25 years, there are women and men who are still in prison that have already served tremendously long sentences, longer than someone that killed someone. Right. And has a life sentence and never been in trouble before, non-violent offenses. So I just have to trust that God will continue leading me and guiding me in this advocacy work that we're doing, because we have a tremendous amount of work in our community to do. But you know, I am grateful for what God has done in my life, but I still want to continue to help those others be free as well.
Right. Thank you so much. God bless you for that. Really, from the bottom of our heart, we really do say that to you.
Thank you.
Keep going. Don't stop. Don't look back, but keep going. You are on the right track.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching The Real with Jamantha. Remember, you are a masterpiece, designed and created by God Almighty. Now, change your mind, and you'll change your world. Thank you so much for watching The Real with Jamantha. Check us out next time, right here on this station. See you then.